When the solid crust of a planet ruptures, every instinct of biological survival is triggered. It is the ultimate extreme in physical scale, a total disruption of the environment we rely on for existence. Now invert that scale. Look past the planetary, past the biological, down to the absolute smallest conceivable unit of matter vibrating in an empty void. Bridging the gap between these two absolute extremes of scale is an 8-verse Arabic text known as Surah al-Zalzalah. The text opens with a description of the earth undergoing a violent total physical convulsion. Yet a mere 7 verses later, it concludes by detailing the precise weighing of a single invisible atom. This transition functions as a structural pivot, leaping from the destruction of a planet to the scrutiny of a particle in a single breath. By tearing apart the physical ground, the text strips away human reliance on earthly permanence and material stability. This deconstruction of the material world serves a specific objective, forcing the reader into a state of hypersensitive moral accountability. We will analyze the exegesis of these 8 verses, drawing from Sayyid Qutb's commentary, In the Shade of the Quran, to see how this internal shift is engineered. This analysis reveals a sequence that recalibrates the observer's sense of scale, shifting focus from external devastation to internal precision. The surah begins by establishing the cataclysm. Historically, scholars have debated whether these opening verses were revealed in Mecca or Medina. The exegesis we are examining favors a Meccan origin, citing the text's highly expressive, sensory, and rhythmic style. In this diagram of the Arabic text, notice the phonetic repetition of the root letters zal, lal, zal in the phrases zulzilat and zilzalaha. This percussive stuttering creates a linguistic friction that reflects the physical stuttering of the earth itself. Destruction. In a worldly quake, a person reflexively attempts to grasp at anything that might steady them, operating on the assumption that the surging ground will eventually stabilize. The text explicitly denies that comfort. This is not a random destructive force, but a systematic unearthing where the planet aggressively brings out its burdens. Through sensory linguistic rhythm, the opening scene breaks down the reader's baseline assumption that the earth beneath them is a permanent, silent fixture. Moving into verses 4 and 5, the narrative shifts from physical shaking to direct communication. The text states that the earth will relate its akhbar. In Arabic, akhbar translates to news, information, or data. This establishes a shift in how we understand the planet itself. This diagram illustrates that transition. The Earth is no longer a passive, inanimate stage. It becomes an active, communicative entity reporting hard data. This transmission of data is not an independent action by the Earth. The text specifies it happens strictly because the divine, the Rab, has inspired and commanded it to speak. The specific news the Earth transmits is a record of its obedience to that command, detailing exactly what occurred upon its surface. The ground beneath your feet is redefined. It is no longer a safe harbor, but an omnipresent recording device tracking your actions. Verse 6 turns the lens away from the speaking earth and focuses entirely on the human reaction to this event. The exegesis describes humanity emerging from the ground disoriented, scattering outward like a swarm of dispersed locusts. The text notes that these masses do not emerge for immediate physical punishment. They come forth strictly to be shown their deeds. This is the central psychological mechanism. The direct confrontation with one's own actions is often more severe than any physical recompense. During mortal life, a human being naturally suppresses regret. They flee from their own misdeeds, instinctively turning away from the ugliness of their choices. Here, that psychological avoidance is stripped away. The individual is forced to look at their exact record in the presence of the divine. The dread engineered by verse 6 does not rely on descriptions of fire. It relies on the absolute presence of an undeniable mirror reflecting one's own choices. This accountability culminates in verses 7 and 8, which introduce the ultimate metric of measurement, the dhara. Linguistically, a dhara is defined as a measure of extreme, almost imperceptible smallness. In this split-screen diagram, the left illustrates the classical dhara, what early exegetes conceptualized as the smallest perceptible thing, like a mosquito or a dust speck in a sunbeam. On the right, we map the modern scientific atom against that ancient definition. Modern science dictates that an atom cannot be seen by the naked eye. It remains invisible even under the most powerful microscopes found in laboratories. As the exegesis notes, the modern atom exists as a vision in the conscience of scientists. Researchers only know it exists through the minute data and tracks it leaves behind. This scientific context does not negate the ancient text. By expanding our definition of how small a particle can be, science reinforces the text's assertion of absolute divine precision. The text states that this subperceptual metric weighs both khair, good, and shar, evil. Whether the dhara is conceptualized as a visible dust speck or an invisible quantum particle, its function is the same. It guarantees an accounting for every microscopic unit of human intention. Stepping back from the granular textual analysis reveals the surah's pedagogical objective. The violent physical earthquake that shatters the planet in the opening verses is a primer. The ultimate target of that shaking is the reader's conscience. This introduces the concept of the mizan, the metaphorical balance scale of ultimate justice. The commentary describes the ideal behavioral outcome as a heart calibrated so highly that it trembles at the thought of a single atom's weight of action. The commentary contrasts this sensitive state with those who possess hardened hearts. These hardened individuals are completely unfeeling. They walk the earth carrying massive sins, crushing mountains of good beneath their burdens without reacting. The text concludes by inverting our baseline reality. While the seemingly solid earth eventually shatters, the microscopic, invisible weight of a single moral choice remains permanent.